Hello, and thanks for joining us on the Beyond Sunday podcast.
You are watching the Beyond Sunday podcast.
So here's today's tough question. Should I feel guilty when I am tempted? So, sin is an issue, right? As a follower of Christ, we can see how it wrecks lives and hurts so many, not to mention the separation it puts between us and God. But what about temptation? That's a problem too, right? Well, let's understand first that they aren't the same thing. Sin is an actual immoral act, while temptation is the desire to do something, often something wrong. James tells us in James 1:12 through 18, how temptation can come upon us and leads us into sin. So they are two different things, even though they are related. Temptation is something that can lead to sin. Still, temptation isn't a bad thing. I don't think so. Jesus himself was tempted. We see in Luke chapter 4 where it says that Jesus was tempted by the devil while he spent 40 days in the desert. This account is actually recorded in Matthew, Mark, and in Luke. Hebrews 4:15 reminds us that we have a high priest, Jesus, who understands our weakness because he himself was tempted and yet did not sin. Jesus himself was tempted in every way we are, and we know that he was perfect. He was able to resist temptation and refused to be drawn into the enemy's trap. Temptation is not immediately something wrong with us. It happens in this fallen world. In fact, 1 Corinthians 10:13 says that no temptation has come upon us except which is common to us all. Temptation should not serve as a point of shame or defeat. It should be a rallying cry for us. It is a warning that we are facing the enemy. Our personal urges or the prompting of the enemy may be at play in our hearts and minds. Temptation just means that it's time to act. We need to avoid feeling guilty for the temptations that come our way. But what do we do about it? We have to act immediately. Ephesians 6 tells us to put on the full armor of God so we can stand against the enemy and his schemes. James tells us to resist the devil and he will flee from us in James 4:7. Peter warns us to be alert and sober-minded in 1 Peter 5:8. Paul says on multiple occasions to flee immorality. It's interesting we are given instructions to resist and to flee. I think it's important to keep that in mind. When tempted, we need to act immediately. The longer things linger, the more power the temptation can build up. We have to act decisively. Temptations are powerful. Some can grip us at a deep soul level. We have to push them away, not see how close we can get before falling over the line. I think when we're honest, a lot of us will toy around with them, leading us deeper and deeper into temptation rather than following Paul's advice. The moment we first experience the first sign of temptation, we must resist it directly with God's truth and turn toward him. The longer it lingers, the harder it is to hear him in our trials. We have to remember to act wisely. When we find ourselves unable to resist effectively or find a temptation luring us in, we have to remove ourselves. Remember, Paul said a wise and decisive action was to flee. Because of our general makeup, situation, or experience, some things have a greater potential to overwhelm us. So we must flee, get out of the situation or environment that is creating the temptation. There is always a way out of the challenges we face. Don't allow shame or guilt to creep in. That will just allow the enemy to keep you distant from your hope for relief, which is Christ. Look back to 1 Corinthians 10:13. Not only does it say that no temptation has overtaken us except which is common to us all, but it also says this: God is faithful, and He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able to handle. There will also be a way to escape, and we can endure the temptation if we look for the path He provides for us to escape. That is such a great promise. We always have a way to claim victory over temptation. And I believe it pleases God to see us turn to Him in our trials. He loves seeing His children dependent on Him. But for now, that's all I know.
This has been another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe.